Morning, John.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Thanks for having me on today.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. We're vertical, which for me is always half the battle, and
That's fantastic.
we made it out of bed, man.
All right. Well, I want to talk to you about millennials and how they're handling this pandemic situation. You deal with your social crews, more the younger side of millennials, people in their late 20s, early 30s, that sort of thing. How are they handling this?
Well, I think it really depends on which way you're looking at it. There seems to be uh, a striking contrast between the medical and medically responsible side of this and the people that are really having a hard time paying their rent. And I do mean rent. Most of my peer group do not own homes. They've been thinking about it. Um, but yeah, it seems to be just a wide mix. And so I guess we'll start with the medical aspect. We've reached a point at which people are venturing out of their caves and looking at the daylight. Um, there are those that have preached stay at home, be quarantined for a very, very long time. And I believe that due to social medias, they are fearful to come out and say that they're ready to get back to work or go to a restaurant because they don't want to come off as contradicting themselves. And I think that that mindset seems to continue in multiple places. Um, for the most part, my peer group has done a good job at following social quarantine and staying at home. Um, but it seems to be an extreme. So either you're on one side of the fence and you're like, I'm not going back out for another month, or you went to restaurants a week ago, and with bars opening up tonight, your whole plans are to go hit them. So it's pretty interesting.
Are you seeing people hoarding cash or blowing cash?
Well, that's another conundrum. So when it comes to the cash on hand, everyone seems to be overtly positive about taking advantage of cheap prices in the markets. Um, but they contradict themselves. So people also will tell you, I think it's going to get lower, but they're actively sending me hot topics and investment tips and saying, what do you think about this? What are your clients doing? Are people putting money to work? And I would say that most people are starting to put cash to work because they believe we're coming out of this quicker um, than slower. If you look back at perhaps the recession of 2008 and early 2009.
Are you seeing people still spending a lot? Are they sitting at home buying more off of Amazon than they ever have before? That sort of thing? Or are they thinking, I've got to save some cash up because I don't know when I'm getting back to work?
It's definitely not the latter. Most of my peer group has really decided at this point to spend money. Um, they've been able to save because, as it turns out, millennials spend most of their money on experiences rather than things. So that's dining, that's going out, that's alcohol, that's things along that nature, and that is online shopping. So um, really, they've saved more money because they haven't been able to go out and spend on the things that they normally do. But that being said, there has been a huge uptick in the instant gratification. I'm going to hop on Amazon and see what happens.
How do you think growing up in nothing but social media all the time has prepared millennials for this, or has it in some interesting
Uh,
way?
I think we believe we are more informed because at the click of a button, you can instantaneously know everything that you need to know about the CDC, on what's going on in China, on the virus itself, on the economy. And for the most part, I think millennials get bad rap because we ride the fence a lot. My dad has always said, if you ride the fence, you end up with splinters. And I think we are guilty of that. Um, but I do believe being in tune with social medias and readily available technology at all times at your fingertips has led folks to at least having an educated opinion on what is happening. And then they try to make up their own mind as best as possible. but you see a lot of confirmation bias with individuals seeking out information to make their opinion the right one. And that's a pitfall of our group.
I know a handful of your friends are degenerate gamblers, so we'll set them aside.
Yep.
In general, what are people buzzing about? Are they excited about biomedical stocks, tech stocks, Bitcoin? What are people, in your demographic, what are they buzzing about when they're talking to you about investments?
So of my peer group that are not the degenerate gamblers, and I would say the small business owners, the recent fathers and mothers who are having a family and are trying to figure out, what am I doing with cash? That has been the story of what is cheapest. Most folks are talking about energy companies and understanding that when oil was pricing at $17 a barrel, that was a screaming buy to folks. It has to go back up. Anything healthcare related is what people are focused on. Anything that has to do with airline industries is a popular topic. There seems to be a consensus that if those industries have taken a 50, 60, 70% hit to their value, that even if we return to half of normalcy in the next year or two, then I'll make 20, 30% annualized on my investment. And that,
You're telling me that millennials are value investors?
it seems to be, but they want a story. I've had a hard time talking about what value actually means and whether or not that's healthcare or airlines or energy or the things that I just talked about. It's the fact that if prices are relatively cheap, that's a good time to buy. And I think when you overlay a story on top of that mindset, people are called to action. But without the story, value is just a fancy word that no one really capitalizes on.
That is really interesting. As you know, value investing has suffered for about a decade. And I would have guessed that you would have told me that the hot stories were all growth related, whether it's tech or what's coming next, what's hot right now. It's really fascinating to hear that there's a little bit of a bent towards value investing, whether or not they think of it that way. And part of my theory is that millennials are more cautious than people think. They're not they don't have as much of a propensity for risk as I think a lot of older people think that they do. And part of my theory there is a lot of millennials came out of college and during a recession or close to it or just after it, and there weren't a lot of jobs available. So they emerged from college with sort of a conservative mindset going into the workforce. I don't know if that's correct, but that's been my theory. What do you think?
For a second there.
Oh, you lost me.
Yeah, I'm back now. Sorry about that.
Short version is do you think millennials are compared to their parents, do you think they're more conservative when it comes to risk taking or more aggressive when it comes to risk taking?
That's a good question. I think you'd have to define risk for millennials in order to get a good answer. Millennials came out of college with not an ideal job market and a lot of debt. I have friends with hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, and they are desperately trying to figure out a way to continue to pay that off at a rate. And with interest rates dropping, that certainly helps. But there's a certain minimum every month that they have to have in cash flow to pay those debts. And because of that, I think they're more careful with their dollars. That being said, back to what you mentioned earlier about hot growth stocks, your Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google, all of those good things, Amazon. There is a perception that those are very expensive. And even though they've been the best performers over the past 4 or 5 years, you can't get millennials to buy expensive things. They just don't do it. And that being said, I think it leads to the idea of value. But they are inherently more conservative than they get credit for, at least on the financial front. Now, the reason they're perceived as not being as conservative is because we grew up in an age of plenty. And I think that we live life a little bit faster than my parents' age group, than the retirees. There was an idea with my parents that you got out of college and you went to work and you started a family, and 15 to 25 years from now, you can put yourself in a position to retire and do the things that you want. And that was their mindset. And millennials feel like it's all about balance. I'll work hard, I'll do the things that I need to, but you're only 30 once and you got to enjoy it while you have the energy to go do that thing. I think that's why we are having kids later. I think that's why we have a tendency as a general group to get out and put a premium, if you will, on experiences. And that in tune is really good for the market and for spending. And when you take that away from us, we get a little itchy and we're ready to get back out there again.
You're in a unique position where you also talk to a lot of retired people. Your parents just retired.
They did.
How are you seeing the baby boomers who are retiring dealing with this, and how does that compare, contrast to the millennials?
Twofold. There's two categories. There is one category of individuals who are retired and have enough, and they're picking up the phone and calling me and saying, hey, I know that our portfolio is designed to be conservative and create a certain amount of income based on our needs, and that's important. But, I also see this as being an excellent opportunity to me to transition out of some safe investments, cash, bonds, et cetera, and take advantage of better pricing. And so they're opportunistic. And then there's the other side, which is my parents who just retired, who barely have enough to support the lifestyle that they've come accustomed to. And they've worked hard to get there, God bless them. But they're worried that if this continues and we don't go back as quickly as possible, that their investment pie is not going to generate enough returns, and they may have to go back to work. My dad's 70, my mom's 68, and that's not something that they're going to be able to do for another 5 or 6 years. So they've tightened their belt. They're in a quandary because they have a golden opportunity between age 70 and age 80, where you have the ability to go do things and you still have the energy to want to do things. So it's a balance of pushing them to get out and get the RV and go play golf and go see the parks and do the traveling that they've wanted to do. My family has always wanted to go to Rome, to see the Vatican, to go to Europe, and they've never done it. And now is the time to do that. And if they don't do it now, they won't be able to enjoy it the same when they're not as mobile at ages 80, 85. But there is this fear because of COVID, because of uncertainty, because of the election year, that they can't spend that money. And if they do, what's going to happen if the market goes down 30, 40% and they don't have the assets that they thought they did to live off of? And so what they're inevitably doing is nothing. They are sitting and waiting. And that is something to me that is concerning because, as you know, life is fragile, life is short. It's important to be financially stable and sound. That's why we do all the planning work that we do, to give people the confidence to say it's okay if you have a 30, 40% dip in the market. We prepared for this. Go out and still do those things. And I think emotionally folks are having a hard time doing that right now.
John, thanks for your thoughts this morning.
Hey, you bet. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to doing it again.
Have a good day.